It was supposed to be just another casual weekend gathering. A few friends, laughter, music, and drinks flowing freely. I had been looking forward to it all week, mostly because it had been a rough month, and I thought a little distraction would do Emily and me some good. My name is Nathan, and my wife, as most of our friends would describe her, had a magnetic presence. Always laughing, effortlessly captivating. The kind of person who lit up a room just by stepping into it. And I suppose for the first few years of our marriage I basked in that glow. We complemented each other in ways that felt rare. I was quieter, more reserved, more grounded. She was exuberant, daring, adventurous. We made it work, or at least I told myself we did. The evening started off harmlessly. Glasses clinked, small talk bounced around the living room, and the familiar faces of friends who had been with us through thick and thin filled the space. I stood near the snack table, pouring myself another drink, scanning the room. Everyone seemed happy, relaxed. Nothing felt off. Yet I remember that subtle shift. A tiny tension in the air. Like the calm before a storm you don't see coming. It started with laughter. Emily, wearing that perfect mischievous smile, had wandered over to Ryan, my best friend since college, and in an instant I felt a small knot tighten in my chest. They were joking, leaning in close, and she brushed his arm. I told myself it was nothing. They had always joked like that, always teased each other. But that laugh, the one where she tilted her head and looked at him in a way she hadn't looked at me in months, sent a flicker of unease through me. I tried to shrug it off, to focus on the music and the conversations I'd started with other friends. But then it happened, slow, deliberate, almost unreal. Right in front of everyone. Literally everyone. Emily leaned forward and kissed Ryan. Not a brief cheek peck. Not a playful brush of lips, but a full, unmistakable kiss. My mind went blank for a second, as if someone had yanked the air from the room. Laughter froze. Conversations halted. Eyes turned toward the kitchen, toward the living room, toward me. And in that suspended moment, I felt the weight of everything. Years of compromise, patience, quiet love, and growing distance pressing down on me. I didn't shout. I didn't throw a glass or demand explanations. I didn't even look angry. I simply took a deep breath. In that split second, a clarity settled over me that I hadn't felt in a long time. This wasn't a mistake, and it wasn't a moment I could ignore. This was a choice, one she had made. And it was undeniable, unarguable. I felt my chest tighten, a low hum of betrayal vibrating through me. But I let it simmer quietly. I reached down, took off my wedding ring, and held it in my hand. The cool metal felt heavier than it should, laden with the years. The nights I stayed up listening to her talk about work or dreams, the mornings I made coffee before she even opened her eyes, the weekends I spent compromising and adjusting. It was all in that small circle of gold. And now it had to go somewhere else. I placed the ring carefully on the polished wooden table right between them, where everyone could see it. The room was silent now. A stark contrast to the buzz of laughter and music just moments before. Ryan froze mid-step, his glass halfway to his mouth, and Emily's eyes widened as if she had just realized something profound, something terrifying. Their faces, previously animated with casual fun, shifted into shock, disbelief, and maybe even fear. I didn't say a word. I didn't need to. The act spoke louder than any argument ever could. I simply turned and walked out. The front door closed softly behind me. A quiet punctuation to a story that didn't need to be told aloud. Outside, the night air wrapped around me, crisp and indifferent. My steps echoed on the pavement as I moved away from the house, away from the chaos, away from everything I thought we had built together. And as I walked, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. A strange, bitter peace. Not because I wanted revenge, not because I felt triumphant, but because I had finally acknowledged the truth. Some things can't be fixed with words, apologies, or explanations. Some betrayals don't need confrontation. They need distance, clarity, and the recognition that continuing would only hollow you out further. I reached the end of the driveway and paused, looking back at the faint glow of the living room lights through the windows. My heart still ached. Not from anger but from loss. And yet there was a quiet satisfaction in knowing that I had claimed the only thing left that was truly mine, my dignity. For a moment I let the world stand still around me, listening to the soft hum of the night and the distant laughter from somewhere far away. And I felt the first flicker of a future where I didn't have to shrink myself to accommodate someone else's choices. I didn't drive home. I couldn't. The thought of stepping back into that house, walking past the laughter, pretending everything was normal was unbearable. Instead, I wandered the quiet streets of the neighborhood, letting the night guide me. My phone buzzed a few times. Messages from friends checking in, emojis and texts I didn't respond to. I didn't want to explain. I didn't want to justify. I simply needed space to think, to feel, to exist outside the weight of betrayal. As I walked, memories flashed through my mind, each one a reminder of how we got here. There was the honeymoon, the weekend trips to Napa Valley, laughing until our stomachs hurt. There was Emily's radiant smile when we bought our first little house together in Charlotte, the way she ran her fingers over the countertops as if she was already imagining our future there. I remembered the late nights we spent talking about dreams, about children, about plans we were so sure we'd share. And I remembered the slow drift, the dinners where her eyes were elsewhere, the touches that had become perfunctory, the laughter that no longer included me. It was bitter, yes, but it was also clarifying. I realized I had spent so much time trying to preserve a version of our marriage that no longer existed. I had compromised, adjusted, and tried to smooth over every rough edge, believing that love alone could bridge the distance that had silently grown between us. But love, I learned, isn't always enough. Sometimes people change. Sometimes the person you knew and trusted chooses a path that doesn't include you. And sometimes the only way to survive with your self-respect intact is to walk away. By the time I returned to my apartment, the first hints of dawn were brushing the sky with pale orange streaks. I poured myself a coffee and sat on the balcony, watching the city slowly wake. The sounds of life, distant traffic, a dog barking, birds chirping, felt oddly comforting. For the first time in a long time, I wasn't thinking about what Emily was doing or who she was with. I wasn't calculating, fearing, or second-guessing. I simply existed, and it was enough. Later that day, I spoke to my closest friends, the ones who had known both of us for years. I didn't recount the kiss in graphic detail. I didn't ask for advice on revenge or confrontation. I simply said, I walked away. That's all. And they understood. Their responses were measured, supportive, and validating in ways I hadn't realized I needed. No one told me to fight, to yell, or to chase after what was lost. Instead, they reminded me that some battles aren't worth waging, and some closures are found in silence and choice, not in confrontation. A week passed. The shock of the event had rippled through our circle of friends, gossip threading its way through the usual conversations. I was careful not to involve myself, letting the silence speak on my behalf. And interestingly, that quiet stance carried a weight of its own. Emily and Ryan tried to reach me at first, texts, calls, even messages through mutual friends. I ignored all of them, not out of spite, but out of necessity. To respond would have meant reopening a wound I was finally learning to let heal. One evening I caught a glimpse of them at a cafe across the street. Emily's hand was resting casually on Ryan's arm, her laughter echoing, bright and familiar. My chest tensed for a moment, a reflex I recognized and let pass. I didn't look again. I kept walking, feeling lighter with each step. It was a strange sensation. Relief intertwined with grief, freedom interlaced with loss. It was the paradox of knowing that leaving someone you once loved doesn't erase the love entirely, but it does preserve the dignity and clarity you need to move forward. And move forward I did, slowly, cautiously, but deliberately. I took up small routines I had abandoned. Morning runs, old hobbies, reading late into the night. I reconnected with friends in ways that weren't defined by the shadow of my marriage. And most importantly, I stopped shrinking myself to accommodate someone else's choices. The ring I had left on that table became a symbol not of failure, but of recognition, that my worth wasn't tied to their validation, and my peace wasn't dependent on someone else's approval. Months later, when asked about that night at the party, I still didn't speak of Emily and Ryan. Instead, I focused on what it taught me. That sometimes the bravest act isn't confrontation or revenge. It's quiet acceptance. It's walking away while retaining your dignity. It's knowing that the shock, the betrayal, the humiliation, all of it, doesn't have to define your story. You define your story. I don't know if Emily ever realized the gravity of what she did. I don't know if Ryan understood the impact of his choices. And frankly, I stopped caring. Because in that moment when I left the house, placed my ring on the table, and walked away, I claimed something they could never take from me, myself. And for the first time in years, I felt something I had long forgotten. a profound sense of peace. Not the loud, triumphant kind, but the quiet, unshakable certainty that I would never again compromise my worth for anyone. And in that certainty I found the freedom to rebuild, to rediscover, and to live on my own terms.